Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're staying warm and safe wherever you are, because it is a frozen tundra here where I am in Ohio. I want to take a quick moment and thank all of you. So you guys don't know this, but on 12/7, I moved my podcast to a host that was a more podcast-friendly platform. In that short time, less than 2 months, we've already hit over 500 downloads, and I have finally reached 50 Apple followers. Doesn't sound big, but for a little indie show run by me, it blows my mind. We are slowly but surely building our own little community here, and that is because of all of you. So whether you're here for the weekly topic, my weekly "How is this my life" chaos, the fact check news, or just learning these tarot cards together with me, I am really glad that you've decided to stick around. So let's go to the topic at hand. Have you ever been in a debate where you feel like you're talking and nothing's actually happening? Like you keep trying to explain the same point, clarifying what you meant, and somehow you're still being misunderstood. That frustration, that's what we're digging into today. And I want to be really clear up front. This episode is not about a specific issue or taking sides on anything. And while I absolutely have my opinions, that's not what this is about. I'm not here to push my views. I'm not here to have a one-sided debate with myself. It's kind of like, it's not about the color of the yarn, but about recognizing the pattern that you're working with and knowing whether or not that pattern is actually going to come together, or if it's never going to work no matter how much effort you put into it. And these patterns show up everywhere. Healthy conversations, of course, political debates, parenting, social issues, you name it. Sometimes we can even see them in discussions we aren't a part of. You know, the ones that we're watching from the sidelines while we munch our popcorn, wondering how this issue can keep going on forever without ever getting resolved. By the end of the episode, my goal is simple. I want to help you spot debate loops sooner so they don't drain your energy, your time, or your sanity. Whether it's someone trying to pull you into one, or recognizing that someone on TV is trying to push one. This is about learning to see the patterns so you can get to the actual point and not just chase the headlines and the slogans. So let's start with how these loops usually begin. Because most of the time, they don't start off badly. It usually happens when one side starts to feel cornered or like they're quote unquote losing. It's kind of like seeing a bad pattern and thinking you can be the one to make it work anyway. There's a big difference between a good faith debate and a bad faith one. On the surface, they can look exactly the same. Same platforms, same tone, same just asking questions energy, but it's the intention underneath that's completely different. In good faith conversations or debates, both people are actually trying to understand something, even if they disagree. There's a desire there to see at least where the other person is coming from, to sit in their chair of thought and try to understand how they got to the conclusions they did. In a bad faith conversation, however, the goal isn't understanding. It's winning, it's dominating, or it's exhausting the other person to the point that they just give up. And unfortunately, the internet, everybody's playground, is absolutely flooded with that second one. And that's kind of why being able to spot the difference is important. The internet started as a place of curiosity, but it has turned into this like high school. Being in, going viral, and winning the crowd matters more than sharing ideas or spreading actual knowledge and information. This is where the idea of the loop trap comes in. A loop trap is when a conversation looks like it's moving forward, but it's just circling the same spot over and over and over again. One of the most common ways this happens is through something called the straw man argument. This doesn't need to be academic or complicated. A straw man is simply when someone argues with your version of your point that you never actually made. Sometimes it's more subtle. They take your point and drop it into a totally different context than the one you intended. Well, if this group believes X, then that has to mean Y. Or a more famous one is they start grouping into something broader. Like, if the person in this group believes X, then everybody in that group feels that way. If they do it, then everyone that is like them does it. Even though that's not what you said at all. What this does is force you into constant correction mode. You're no longer discussing the topic. You're too busy explaining what you didn't mean. Now you've fallen into the loop. And instead of building on the ideas, you're stuck defending what you've already said. And at first, it can feel productive. You think, okay, they just don't understand. So if I clarify one more time, we'll be on the same page. But it's like standing there waiting for coffee to brew, only to realize the coffee maker was unplugged the whole time. That's one of the biggest red flags right there. When you find yourself explaining the basics again and again and again, and not actually building on the point, not moving forward, just resetting the conversation over and over again. You usually notice a lot when you start your sentences with, okay, but, again and again. That's a huge clue. Because at this point, more than likely you're already in the loop. All right, get your coffee. It's time for our weekly How Is This My Life chaos that is Stitch Happens. And it's funny because this week is a perfect example about how miscommunication can spiral. And I have to admit, this is fully on me. This is my bad. It's the fact that most of the time my brain goes faster than my stubby fingers can type. I'm at home, I'm scrolling Facebook, and I text my husband, and the text says, "Home Alone, Mom died." Now, in my mind, it was perfectly clear. It said exactly what I wanted it to say. What my brain did, however, was add in the words that my fingers and eyes apparently decided weren't needed for comprehension. What I meant to say was the actress, Catherine O'Hara, who played the mom in Home Alone, had died. Or at least that's what I thought I was saying. That's it. That's the whole thing. Yeah, what my husband reads is, I'm home alone and my mom died. Because he's not inside my brain. So he does not autofill my missing words the way I do. He fills them in with his own. So naturally, he panics. He shows the text to his boss so he can call me immediately. He needs to figure out what's going on. He calls me completely freaking out And of course, to add to the chaos, my phone decides this is the perfect moment. It wants to be dramatic too. It takes about 30 seconds from the time I answer the phone before I can actually talk, because my Beats Solo headphones decided that was a great moment to turn themselves on and take the call from inside my case. Perfect timing, right? So he's yelling, hello, 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 thinking I'm so upset that I can't speak. While in reality, I'm fighting, again, phone, stubby fingers, trying to get it to switch from headphones to handset. When I finally explained to him that I meant the actress from the movie, he's just dumbfounded. Like, he's truly stunned by my word choices. He's questioning a lot of his life decisions at this point, probably including why he married me. So then he decides he's going to send a screenshot of the text to my brother, who just happens to work with him in a different department, followed by a text that says, your sister sent this. Can you believe her? Yeah. The problem is my brother has a smartwatch, and he only sees the first screenshot on his watch, because apparently the day would not be complete if technology didn't also want in on the joke. So now he freaks out because, again, his mind fills in his words. So he's thinking I'm home alone. Everybody thinks I'm home alone, and that my husband's mom died. Once he finally sees the rest of the messages and realizes what's actually happened, he's in disbelief too. Like, how is my sister this dumb? So what does he do? Well, he thinks it's funny. He shows his boss. Again, his boss panics and tries to send my brother home. All of this, 2 departments in an uproar, multiple people were almost running out of work because of one poorly worded sentence due to stubby fingers. No one was malicious. No one was trying to twist anything. Everyone just kind of filled in the gaps with assumptions and reacted to what they thought the message said. Now imagine that same kind of misread, but online. Everyone fills in the missing context with their own words, and chaos usually ensues. All right, let's talk about shifting the goalposts. Another really common way debates get stuck in a loop is something called shifting the goalpost. You know, it's kind of like when you're crocheting and you tell yourself just one more row and then you'll do the laundry. Except you look up and you have half a blanket and the laundry is still judging you from the corner. This one actually is easier to spot once you know what you're looking for. At its core, it's very simple. You answer the question that was asked, and suddenly that answer isn't good enough anymore. The standards change after you already met it. Here's an example. What color is the sky? Blue. Okay, well, what about the clouds? Well, they're white. Yeah, but what if it's a rainy day? See what just happened? What this does is it keeps you stuck in a permanent state of proving yourself. No matter how clearly you respond, there's always a new requirement, a new angle, a new demand for evidence waiting for you. No answer is ever satisfying, and there will never be a right answer because they keep changing the question. And this is an important distinction. This is not someone who wants an honest debate or discussion. This is not how someone behaves when they're interested in a mutual understanding. Usually you get this kind of conversation with someone who wants to win, no matter the cost or the facts. The goal isn't clarity, it's dominance. It's okay to ask to elaborate when you don't understand something, but that's not what this is. And that's kind of what makes this especially tricky, because it feels like progress. You think you're getting closer. You think, okay, we're narrowing it down. We're getting into the details of it. But in all actuality, you're not moving forward. You're just being redirected. Some common signs: you're trapped. That's not what I meant. Well, what about this instead? The real moment to notice it is when the rules keep changing. Again, remember, we're in that loop, so the conversation doesn't build. It just resets over and over and over again. And once you see that pattern, it's a lot easier to stop blaming yourself for why your point's not landing. At this point, it's usually a sign that it's time to stop. You're working on a never-ending project that you can't see. And you just keep doing row after row after row until you just finally throw it in a corner and quit. And that's exactly what they want. They want you so fed up that you let them win. But really, they lost before it even started. If someone's not playing an honest game, they're kind of disqualified from the beginning. All right, I hope you have your full cup of coffee, because the Epstein update is going to require a lot of coffee. Again, I want to timestamp these. It is February 4th, 5:30 in the morning. This is the information I had when I went to bed yesterday. The Justice Department did a document dump of more than 3 million pages, plus 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. Now, what this done is blown open several claims made by powerful figures and what their ties were to Jeffrey Epstein. Already, there's a lot of this silence is its own admission with this release. The fallout is hitting boardrooms, government offices, most importantly, the victims who were promised protection for them and transparency for the offenders. So as an example, I'm going to point out Howard Lutnick. He is the Commerce Secretary. Now, previously, Mr. Lutnick was on a podcast that insisted he had not interacted with Epstein since 2005. He had told the podcaster that Epstein was a creep and disgusting, and he made his money being a blackmailer. And that after their first meeting, he and his wife decided that he would never be in the same room as Epstein again for any reason. But just like the Maury show, the documents proved that that was a lie. DOJ records show that Epstein arranged a planned visit for Lutnick to come to his private island in 2012 with his wife and children and another couple. 4 years after Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008. Additional communications between Epstein and Lutnick, or Epstein's people and Lutnick's people, placed Lutnick in Epstein's orbit well into the 2010s, including fundraising and award-related events. And of course, when people reached out to him for comment after the newest released, he has not answered. So let's talk about the other resignations and script documents. Multiple individuals named in the files they've been released from boards and advisory roles within 48 hours. We don't have a list of all the confirmed names yet. Some documents were uploaded and then deleted from the DOJ's public portal. Again, raising all kinds of questions about the compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Members of Congress have singled potential oversight hearings if the DOJ continues to withhold or retract materials. Also, it's hard to claim you're protecting victims when you actually posted unredacted underage photos. of victims. And this is the most important part of the story. Many victims' names were not properly redacted, despite explicit legal requirements. Some photos of the victims, including minors, were unredacted. Survivors and their attorneys are furious, not only because of the privacy violations, but because the DOJ continues to redact the names of powerful men while exposing the people that Epstein harmed. Advocacy groups call this second betrayal, echoing the 2008 non-prosecution agreement that kept victims in the dark. This mistake seems like a stark warning. Be careful what you wish for. The files also revealed extensive communication between Epstein and Steve Bannon, importantly including political influence efforts, repeated outreach with him and Elon Musk, contact with world leaders. There's some especially concerning with Russia's dictator Putin, tech executives, and cabinet officials. This file dump has a clear picture of Epstein's global influence network and how many people stayed close to him long after his conviction. So remember, public distance does not mean private withdrawals. It just means they went under the radar. I want to end with this story because I think it's important. A major press freedom story is unfolding alongside the Epstein chaos. We talked about the ICE and all the deaths. So ICE is being protested. Former CNN anchor Don Lemon, and journalist Georgia Ford were arrested and federally charged for documenting an anti-ICE protest inside a Minnesota church. Now, Lemon said during the stream he was not with the protesters, but documenting the protest, which is a journalist's right under the First Amendment. A federal judge initially said there was no probable cause or charges, but prosecutors decided they were going to bring the case anyway. So why is this a red flag? Journalists were arrested for doing journalism. Documenting a protest, they were not participating. Legal experts call this one of the biggest First Amendment tests of the Trump presidency. The arrest comes amid escalating federal crackdowns on immigration protests in Minnesota, raising concerns about selective enforcement and political targeting. And as always, I just want to remind you the best thing you can do is pick a topic you care about. It doesn't have to be any of this. It could be, whatever, Department of Education being closed, whatever you feel called. Political pressure is the only thing they answer when their power is at risk. And they're the only ones in a position to do something. All right, so now we've talked about, and I've showed you how loops start, how the goalpost gets shifted. The next question is, well, how do you get out of one? First, you need to recognize a loop you can't win. There are a few clear signs. No acknowledgement of what you're actually saying. No shared reality. You're on completely different pages. You're talking crochet and they're talking knitting. Looks the same, but it's not. There's no forward movement. You're spinning in circles. Again, you're not building. You're stuck in clarifying mode every time. Like I said, it's okay to ask a question and have to clarify, every once in a while. But if every time it's just clarify. Once you notice, it helps to reframe leaving. Leaving isn't quitting. It's opting out of nonsense. You went into the conversation knowing the rules. They refused to play by those rules. So it's not actually you quitting. It's them refusing to actually engage. It's like playing with Legos. Nothing gets built if they keep knocking the Legos over every time you get a couple levels up. Any more energy you spend at this point is just wasted. So here's some ways to exit without guilt. This is a never-ending loop with you. My coffee is cold, so I'm done. Or, I don't think this is productive. I'd rather focus my energy on, and then fill in the blank. Crochet, reading, whatever. Silence is also a response. Sometimes it's the loudest one. And here's the important permission you need to give yourself. Stop explaining yourself. No matter how clearly you lay it out, they are not listening. They're just deciding how to twist what you say next. Again, these are conversations with someone who doesn't want to have a discussion. They want to dominate and they want to win. So take your yarn, go home, and leave the session behind. There's nothing productive left in it. And honestly, the world is too crazy already, and we ain't got time for that. And here's the part no one tells you. Leaving a loop feels uncomfortable at first. Especially if you value clarity, fairness, or being understood. It can feel like walking away from an unfinished project. Like, if I just do a couple more rows, then this hat will look cute. But in reality, it's already a disaster wrapped in nonsense. Kind of like an AI pattern. The project was never going to be finished. You were the only one building, while they were busy running off with the other end of it, making it completely unravel. You know, kind of like the cat that wants to help. So set your boundary and take it as a small win and file this knowledge away. Some people like to speak in loops, and you don't have to ride that train anymore. All right, so let's wrap up this week, how we always do, with our grounding shuffle happens. This week's card is Judgment. Take a few deep breaths and let yourself absorb the imagery. This card is intense, but also peaceful at the same time. There's a beautiful oasis surrounded by mountains. Between two of the mountains is a stone arch covered in greenery and flowers. On the ground below, calm pond reflects the scene. Right in front of the arch, at the center, there's a bright, glowing light, almost like a star is bursting forward. Hovering above the light is a female figure wrapped in ivy. Atop the arch is sitting a glowing orb, moonlight, creating a softer light. A vertical pillar. At the base of the pillar, the gold wings extend on each side. And right where the light and the wings meet, tall flowers grow. The whole card radiates awakening, clarity, and alignment. Upright, judgment isn't about being judged. It's about answering a call. It's a moment of realization. It is where you are asked to step into awareness and decide what you're going to do with what you know. Reversed, it can point to resisting the call, staying stuck in self-doubt, self-judgment, or replaying the same situations because it feels safer than change. Judgment is the call to stop self-sentencing. That voice in your head saying, if I just explain it better, if I just say it one more way, they'll finally get it. This card reminds you, you don't need to be understood by everyone. You get to choose when to speak, and just as importantly, when not to. Judgment gives permission to let dead arguments stay dead, to stop dragging them back to life out of obligation or guilt. Some conversations don't need closure. They just need to end. You don't owe anyone your energy. And in the case of loops, you definitely don't owe them your peace. And that's the energy I want you to take with you this week. All right, my people, that's it for the week. So just a quick reminder, not every debate deserves your energy. You're allowed to protect your peace and be principled. Those two things are not opposite. So this week, I invite you to just start noticing loops sooner. In your conversations, even in the ones you just watch unfold. Pay attention to how they feel in your body. If you're stuck repeating yourself, clarifying endlessly, or feeling drained instead of engaged, that's information for you. And you're allowed to step out earlier than you used to. Because you don't owe clarity to anyone who is committed to confusion. If they don't want to see the forest for the trees, that's a them problem. It's not on you to show them. As always, like, follow, rate, comment, share with a friend, send a carrier pigeon, whatever your app wants you to do, subscribe. Whatever you can do so we can keep growing this little coffee chat hangout together. And remember, as always, keep your stitches sassy, your coffee strong, and your spirit grounded. I'll talk to you next time.